Okay, so this afternoon we've heard from Natasha, and I was making a couple of notes through her presentation. Some comparisons actually between cars and motorbikes, quite interesting. Natasha had lots of data. I've got lots of pictures, hopefully. Natasha said that she had the best driving simulator in the UK. You probably have. I'd like to think we've probably got the best motorcycle simulator in the UK. At Coventry and Southampton. We'll say a little bit more about that. It's probably the only one in the UK, actually, apart from other labelled ones. I also thought, even though it's quite late in the actual meeting, it might just be nice to have a quick show of hands, just to show that you're still awake. Who rides a motorbike here? Okay. Who's never ridden a motorbike before? Okay. Of those people who ride motorbikes, who came here on a motorbike? Well done. Thank you. I was going to come myself, but I actually caught the train, so I wimped out there. Of all those people, there's quite a few people who ride motorbikes, and that's really good to see, so it makes my job a bit easier, because I'm preaching to the converted here. How many of you have had an accident on your motorbike in the past? An accident. Okay. Keep your hands up if it was your fault. Okay, and keep your hand up if you think that some form of ITS, whatever it might have been, would have made any difference to your accident. Okay, well, that's just interesting. That's interesting. I mean, I'm not really going to elaborate on that through my presentation. It's just little things that came to me as we were talking. It's great to see so many motorcyclists here, and that's one of the things that I'm going to take away from today, the fact that we've had such a great opportunity for motorcycle-minded people to come together, and also we brought a few people in from the dark side of four wheels. And then maybe educated them in the ways of two wheels, so that's good. Just as another quick show of hands, and there's probably not so many more hands to go up on this one, put your hands up if you're an academic doing research into rider behaviour. Okay, good, there's a few, you're more than I expected, so thank you. If everybody had put their hands up for being a motorbike rider and an academic, this would have been the shortest presentation. I'd just finished there. Because you probably know everything I'm going to tell you. Okay, so I'm not quite sure how sensitive this is. If I start to fade away, if I walk too far away from the microphone, start waving and let me know. So we're going to talk about human factors in motorcycling, and I want to take a little step back really and think of it more from the research perspective. We've looked at technology, we've looked at car drivers, and now we want to look at motorcyclists and think, well, how can we do research? How can we actually learn some of the information? How can we gather the data that we need? What are the sorts of ways forward, and where might this idea or this discipline of human factors actually help us? Okay, the first challenge of human factors is to use technology successfully. Right. Aha, there we go. A few stats there. We've heard lots of stats, and I'm not going to go on about them too long. It's really just to give a bit of context. We know that motorcyclists are very vulnerable. We know that they represent a small number of users, but a high number of accident statistics. These numbers are a little bit old. There are newer numbers out there, but it kind of gives you a flavour that we're a vulnerable road user group, and a very unique road user group. The most sort of common accidents from the literature in the UK seem to be these three types of accidents. These right-of-way violations, or SMIDSes, which is short for sorry mate, I didn't see you. This is where the car pulls out at a junction, fails to observe the motorbike, and the motorcyclist makes connection with the car somehow. Loss of control on bends, usually when only the motorcyclist is involved. This is particularly prominent in the UK. We've got lots of twisty roads. People like to go out at weekends. Sometimes people don't get around all the bends they set out to get around. And then there's overtaking and filtering. So this can be particularly problematic. I commute 100 miles each day when I go to work, 50 miles there, 50 miles back, motorway and some back roads. And if I'm stuck in the dual carriageway and I'm trying to filter through, the amount of cars that move out to try and squeeze my path through and stop me, I think, well, what's the point? You know, I've freed up a space further back for another car maybe, and you're going to stop me from making progress. It hasn't happened in an accident so far, but potentially that's quite a dangerous situation to be navigating through. So how can human factors support Europe's riders? What is human factors? Who feels confident in giving me a definition of human factors? No, we've all gone quiet. Okay, don't worry. The simple definition of human factors is the science of human work in all its guises. Human factors, ergonomics are usually used quite interchangeably, but often when we think about ergonomics, we think about the physical design of things, the physical design of the motorbike to fit the rider. Human factors perhaps is a bit more encompassing in terms of human performance, human limitations, human requirements. And I want to focus on the requirements as we go through the rest of this presentation. So we can think about rider cognition, riders' mental processing, and we heard from Natasha's presentation, which was really good, about the sorts of things like workload and situation awareness, the amount of effort it takes to ride a motorbike, how that might change over time depending on the traffic, depending on the weather, depending on how tired we are when we set out or by the time we finish our ride. But also this idea of experience and also this idea of spare capacity, because in one way automation tries to free up or give us a bit more spare capacity. It will do things for us, but as we noted in the last presentation, when things go wrong or we have to step in quite quickly, we've kind of been out of the loop for quite a while. We have to step back in and usually make quite a quick decision, and that's when we're most vulnerable to making the wrong decision. So this idea of spare capacity, experience, are some of the key issues in which human factors tries to explore and come up with some kind of fundamental basis for then deploying useful technology. Things like attention and splitting attention between our task and the environment. We've seen lots of different sort of ways of representing the interaction of ITS, the user, the vehicle, the environment. But it boils down to three simple things. We've got a user, we've got some technology, and they're operating within some sort of context. And we'll take that forward in a moment or two. Decision making. So how do we get distracted? What are the problems with distraction? This idea of confirmation bias. If something happens and we're not quite aware of what it is or we don't quite understand it, we try and find the most plausible explanation for it and then find evidence to support that, even if it is the wrong interpretation. That takes up time, it takes up processes. It means that by the time we've actually reacted to the situation, we haven't really had as much time and opportunity to respond to it as we could have done. So we could be focusing on the wrong issues to begin with. So motorcycling as an interactive system, we've seen many of these diagrams, I think, over the last sort of day and a half. We've got the rider, we've got the motorcycle, we've got the environment, and we've got this lovely little happy spot in the middle where everything's coming together in perfect harmony, although very rarely does it come together in perfect harmony. But motorcyclists are a funny old breed, aren't we? I'm guessing if I say to you, I had a good riding day the other day, everything felt connected, everything felt good, you probably understand what I mean. That you have a good riding day, sometimes you have a bad riding day. It doesn't mean you have an accident, it just means that things aren't quite connecting right. So I like to think that when I have a good riding day, I'm kind of in the middle of that zone there where everything's working perfectly. It's a little bit more complex than that. We've got the rider inputs. If we take it through on an anti-clockwise direction from the top there, we've got the rider inputs to the motorbike. The motorbike then interacts with the environment. The environment then interacts with the motorbike and also with the rider to give him some sort of perception, or her, sorry, some sort of perception of what's going on. And so trying to understand all these complex interactions is something which motorcycle human factors tries to achieve. And quite often we think about the rider and the motorbike in isolation. Just one rider, one motorbike. A little bit like we used to think about humans and computers, human-computer interaction. In actual fact, we've got many riders, many motorbikes interacting with their machines in the environment. Here's the environment. Here's lots of riders and lots of machines. They could be motorcyclists, they could be car drivers, they could be lorry drivers, they could be autonomous cars with people inside them. But we all share that green space, that environment. And I think one of the arguments that I've heard sort of over the last day or so is, how do we get that kind of harmony for all these different types of users? And I would argue from a human factors perspective that each of those users has different user needs. And we need to try and profile them as best we can to understand and design solutions that suit every different type of user. Now, obviously, we can't do it for every individual person. We have to do it for sensible kinds of groupings of people. So there's some systems issues here. If we think of it as a socio-technical system, we've got people, we've got technology all working together within a shared space anyway, not just individuals. Then we can think of it as a wider system, and not just a transport system, but an interaction space in which motorcyclists, car drivers, autonomous machines are all working together. And so the performance of one agent in the system, if I'm riding my motorbike and I'm riding it particularly badly, unless that automated system on a car detects me riding badly, the automated car or the driver in another car is going to have to interpret what I'm doing and take avoiding action. I hasten to add, I don't ride that badly most of the time. We can also think about training and expertise and confidence and the differences between novice and experienced and maybe advanced riders. In the UK, this is something which we've done a bit of research in, and I'll take you through a very quick slide just to highlight some of those issues. Things like rider fatigue and alertness. I was talking to the police in the UK, and the idea of professional riders, paramedics, police, who ride for long periods of time. They're not the leisure riders necessarily that we perhaps have been thinking about quite a lot here. But how can ITS support their needs? And is that going to be different from maybe a Sunday rider? Quite possibly so. Then we've got things like situational factors. I'm preaching to the converted here, so you can probably read those bullet points at the bottom if you can see them and think, yeah, I understand all that. But I often talk to car drivers, and when I start saying, well, we haven't got sun visors and we don't have windscreen wipers, they sort of go, well, crikey, what happens when it rains? You get wet, you know. You look through your visor, you carry on. I had an interesting conversation with somebody over coffee break this morning saying that you can spot car drivers motorcyclists who drive the cars because they look over their shoulders more, which is good. They do that whilst they're in the car, but they also don't clean the windscreen so much. And my wife is always telling me to clean my windscreen more when we're in the car. And usually I'm saying this is a lot better than my visor, but that just worry her. But there's also other issues. We're very aware of the road surface. We're looking at the road surface all the time, perhaps more so than car drivers. Because if we get any lack of contact on those 2 points on the road that we've got, we feel it. A little twitch may be actually exaggerated. It may not even be noticeable, but you feel it under the bike. In a car, you've got 3 other points of contact. So if one wheel goes over a manhole cover or a slippery bit of paint or a bit of diesel, you don't necessarily interpret it in the same kind of way. Also the idea of thermal comfort. I think Natasha was telling me the other day that her husband was on a long ride, he got cold, he got wet, and that increases fatigue. I've had it myself when I've ridden home from work. You set off, it's sunny, 5 minutes later it's raining, as it usually is in the UK these days, and before long you're getting cold because you're getting wind chill, you're getting damp. And I don't think there's any other form of road transport where the extremes of thermal comfort are quite extreme as they are. You can go from being very hot to being very cold, and quite dangerously so at times, depending on the environment.